go ahead and get started. Let some more people join in as we get going. But hi, everyone. Thank you and welcome for joining us for the Herbal Remedies for Gut Health workshop with Allegheny Mountain Institute, partnered with Augusta Health. We are an educational nonprofit working to cultivate healthy communities through food and education. We strive to meet our mission through a three-pronged approach, which includes an 18-month tuition-free farm and food system fellowship, institutional support for schools and hospitals, and regional networking to build a food system that nourishes our bodies, our environment, and our economy. I'm Sarah Spinner. I'm a community fellow with Allegheny Mountain Institute, and I'll be hosting today's workshop. Everyone's currently on mute, so if you have any questions, please utilize the chat box at any time. I'll be monitoring it throughout the workshop. We'll have some time dedicated for questions during the workshop and at the end of the workshop. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank Heather for taking the time and the effort to put together a great presentation for us today and share her expertise with us. And before I pass things off, I'd love for you guys to all go to the chat box, get familiar with it, and let us know where you're tuning in from and anything you're excited to learn about. We love hearing from all of our participants.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to the Allegheny Mountain Institute for inviting me. I love to talk to herby people and people that love plants in almost any venue. So great to be with so many Zoomers today and to get a chance to talk about digestive allies from the herb world. And I'm broadcasting from the Elderberry today, and we are Central Virginia's first FDA registered herbal apothecary here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we've been open since about 2013, and we do teach some classes. So if you're interested in short herb classes that are usually just a couple hours long, you can visit our website, and I have a slide later that gives that email address, website address rather, and I think we'll just dive into our topic, and I'll tell a bit about me as we go along. I'm usually not that comfortable talking about myself. I guess I could mention that I've been a clinical herbalist since 2008. I split my time between seeing clients here at the Elderberry. I'm on staff here at the Elderberry, and then I also teach in the Foundations and Clinical program at Sacred Plant Traditions School of Herbal Studies here in Charlottesville, Virginia as well. And I have a slide connecting to the herb school too. So there's lots of chances to learn about herbs in Central Virginia. So pretty exciting place to live. I also am currently teaching undergraduate students at West Virginia University through the College of Natural Resources and Agriculture, which is something else that I've really been enjoying lately. Just seeing how excited young people are about integrating food and herbs into a healthy, sustainable lifestyle. So on to our topic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Sarah, and start my PowerPoint.
While she's getting that up, thank you all for sharing where you guys are coming from. We're so happy to have you here.
What are some of the places, Sarah?
Let's see. We have some from right here in Stanton, other parts of Virginia, Maryland, California, Washington, Georgia, Florida, New York, and Texas, all over the place.
That's terrific.
Yes, we're all so happy to have you.
I think most of the plants that we're going to be talking about today could be found in any of those places. So that's good. That's good. All right. Well, I like this first slide because it highlights one of my favorite digestive herbs out there. And this is a very common yardweed that can be found on every continent in the world. And this is called plantain, or Plantago major. And a lot of times when people hear the word plantain, they think I'm talking about bananas, but nope, this is the common yardweed, and this is a very soothing plant for the digestive system, particularly the mucous membrane tissue of the digestive system. So if you've ever suffered from food poisoning or diarrhea, the after effects of vomiting, anytime there's irritation, inflammation, burning, anywhere between mouth and anus, plantain tea could be a very helpful ally for you. So I had to put that on my first slide. So I really wanted to start our talk today just by giving a little context because really the way that we are engaging with herbs is very traditional, very ancient. We're not engaging with herbs from a Western medical model as much, where it's like a this for that. You know, people will ask me, what herb should I use for a headache? And the truth is, there's not one herb that fits all headaches. So it's not a one size fits all proposition. And if you look at traditional cultures all over the globe, they all had frameworks for identifying patterns of imbalance in the body. And the thing about herbs and herbalism is that it's the medicine of the people. And these traditional frameworks help keep it that way. They're very easy to learn. Now I'm just going to be giving you a little taste today, just a little bit of a primer. So, we would need a little bit longer class to make more progress on energetic herbalism, but I definitely want you to understand a little bit about the vocabulary that I'm going to be using. It's very easy. Herbal energetic sounds very woo-woo, but it's not. It's just a vocabulary that describes what our senses perceive when we're interacting with plants. This form of herbalism is really based on that integration of not just body, mind, and spirit, but also the integration and interconnectedness of all things. And that really the patterns that we see outside of ourselves in nature, in the world, are the very same patterns that we see in our bodies, because we're not separate from nature, we're part of nature. And so this way of looking at plants is very much based on the idea and understanding that true health is really balance. And when we're trying to understand plants from this perspective, and then we make a match between a person and an imbalance in a plant to help them, there's a much higher chance of it being an effective match, of the herb, quote unquote, working and bringing about relief when we use these frameworks. And they're very individualized. So definitely going to be in the herbal energetic realm today. Here's just a little glance at one herbal tradition that didn't lose, the line of knowledge was never broken in China. So over 5,000 years of healing. And this is a little chart that kind of shows how the seasons and the elements and the organ systems and flavors of our foods and flavors of our herbs all work together to bring balance in the body. And I like this chart for a few reasons. One reason is because we're talking about digestion today. And if you look at all of the seasons and all of the elements, every single one except for the water element has to do with digestion. So we know that the digestive system is incredibly important. Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut. We know that over 80% of our immune system resides there. And just looking at this traditional framework, we have the liver in the spring, we have the small intestine in the summer, we've got the spleen in the stomach coming in, the earth element of late summer, and then the large intestine in this current season that we're in metal. And if you find that all very confusing and energetic herbalism is new to you, I really encourage you to check out some of our classes. I'm also going to share some of my favorite titles and primers with you as well, if you'd like to know more about looking at herbs from this perspective. Also, one of the recipes we're going to be making today is called bitters. And so really important to understand that the bitter flavor specifically aligns with the small intestine. And the small intestine is where our body separates pure from impure when the food comes down and reaches it. And bitter can really help us assimilate our food and digest our food. And we'll get into that, the therapeutics of that flavor a little later in the program. In Western energetic herbalism, we really look at something called tissue states. But the interesting thing is, you know, these terms don't just apply to our bodies and the tissues in our bodies, but they also apply to herbs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But, you know, if you look at hot and cold in the body, what I have on this slide are some sensations that you might have if you have an issue that involves heat, and some sensations that you might have if you've got something cold going on in your body. And the beautiful thing is that as human beings, we're all, you know, we're a mix of everything. So you may have more than one prevalence of these temperatures in different systems. So if you're dealing with heat, you may experience red cheeks, red tongue, or redness on your skin, maybe even itchiness on your skin. But one thing's for sure, if there's something hot and itchy on your skin, you're having an issue with heat and inflammation inside the body, not just on the skin. Sensations of heat include fever, sweating. Most people are familiar with hot flashes. Sometimes people, even in the late afternoon, will just get sensations of heat if they're a more hot-natured person. A quick temper, infection is considered heat in energetic herbalism. And any kind of process in the body that becomes hyperactive or expansive would be governed by heat, as would something, any color of mucus that's yellow or green. And that's regardless of where it's coming from in the body. And it's kind of, you know, not surprising in herbalism that we're very interested in what's coming out of the body, whether it's when you're in the bathroom, whether it's when you blow your nose, vaginal secretions, any of those type of things. We always want to know what color, because as I said, clear and white would be considered cold, and yellow or green would be considered heat. Cold, on the other hand, is more indicative of hypofunctioning, right? Cold slows down. Probably everybody's had the experience of being out on a cold winter day and just kind of wanting to curl up into the fetal position, right? We right away want to protect our internal organs from that heat and start to kind of curl up. Pale face, pale tongue, fatigue, sensations of cold. You know, when a client sits in my chair and it's clear when we start talking about winter and how they feel in the winter, they actually dread it. They dread the heat. They're scared of, or dread the cold rather, and dread the winter weather setting in, then that's a sign that there's probably some cold at play. So these offer kind of hints of what a person's constitutional set point is. And that's really a great place to start when you're choosing herbs. We also look at the moisture spectrum when we're looking inside the body, but then also at herbs. Dryness is obviously a lack of moisture, fluid, lubrication, and moisture, we're not just talking about wetness or water, but we're also talking about oil. And we know how important fats, good fats, are for the health of many systems in the body, not to mention the central nervous system and the cardiovascular system. But you know, when there's that dryness present, there's a hard time, the body has a hard time soaking in the nourishment, the water and the oil that is there. And I love this picture in the background because it reminds me that a lot of times when the earth is very parched and then a rain comes, it really has a hard time soaking up the water, and our bodies can be the same way. Again, the body is a reflection of the outer environment, the seasons, and so on. So our tissue can become fragile and wrinkled and atrophied. We can get cracks. There can even be a loss of tissue function. Dry tissue can get very tight. We'll talk about tension in a moment. And then dampness can cause its own issues, right? Dampness is what happens when there's, you know, stuffiness in your sinuses, basically any kind of mucus, phlegm. We have all these words for it. One old time word for phlegm is catarrh, which is not guitar, like as in the instrument, but catarrh. You'll find that in a lot of the old medical texts and herbal texts. But sweat, tears, lymph, all of these are bodily fluids that can become damp and mucousy and be impacted. And particularly impacted our mucous membranes. And when we talk about the digestive system, again, mouth to anus, we have a mucous membrane. And that mucous membrane has to be damp enough to be flexible, right? We want there to be good moisture in those membranes, but we don't want it to be so damp that we have a mucus situation. Because then what's happening is the lymphatic system is getting overwhelmed with a lot of metabolic debris, and our filtering systems don't work very well when there's too much dampness. So we think about runny noses, stuffy sinuses. If we're talking the digestive system, we could even say mucus-covered stool would be one thing that you may see if you have too much dampness in that system. And then we have another tissue state that we like to address in herbalism is called the tension spectrum. And that's basically tight to relaxed. So we want the tissues in our entire body, including our digestive system, to have just the right tension to be able to function. And when things are too tight, they get crampy, they get painful. And energy does not move smoothly through tissue that's too tight. Probably everybody's become awakened in the middle of the night from a cramp in your foot or your calf, and you can't even move it when it does that. Think about the tension of gas pains, the tension of bloating, the tension of menstrual cramps or lower back pain. That tightness just really makes it problematic for the tissue to absorb nutrition and fluids. And then also, of course, it's painful. Now, overly relaxed is its own set of problems, right? We don't think of the digestive system like other muscles, but in a sense it is. It can become flabby and prolapsed. You can get a rectal prolapse, or your intestines can just become too loose. And when they're overly relaxed, when tissues in the body are overly relaxed, they're going to tend to put off more fluids and just kind of a damp flowing all the time. And also they don't function properly. So we really want to have the proper tension to have the digestive system working. And if you found the last several slides confusing or they pique your interest, these are my 3 teachers who taught me pretty much everything I know about energetic herbalism. And the first book that you're seeing on the left side of your screen is from my main teacher and dear friend and mentor, Kat Meyer. And she recently published this book. Actually, it's not quite out yet. I'm going to read you a passage in a moment, and it's coming from the proof that's not for resale. So there's been a little backlog in publishing world these days with the supply chain, what it is. And that book will be coming out the end of November now, I think is the final release date. But Kat has written what I consider to be kind of an energetic herbalism tome. And I'm going to read to you kind of a couple paragraphs from her book about energetic herbalism. This is under the section called Honoring the Roots of Energetic Models. The word energetic may conjure images of New Age crystals, and the term is sometimes misapplied to any and all new healing modalities. In truth, though, energetic herbalism is as old as the earth itself. This mode of healing is based on the truth that the vital force of nature, and the vital force of an individual human are one and the same. Indigenous cultures all over the world call this force spirit in their native language. The ancient Greeks called this force vitality. The Chinese call it qi. The Iroquois nation calls it orenda. Ayurveda calls it prana, and West Africans call it ashe. The goal of energetic herbalism is to enhance our terrain, which is our inner landscape, our tissues, organs, vessels, and all the forces that are engaged to maintain our health. The aim is to create an environment where we optimize nutrition from food, breath from air, and joy from our surroundings, so our vitality flows with the least hindrance. To be in the flow is the goal of these traditions. So I just really love those beginning paragraphs from the book, and I hope y'all check it out when it comes out. The second one is Healing with the Herbs of Life, and this is by Leslie Tierra, who is an acupuncturist and teacher. She and her husband, Michael, own the East-West School of Herbalism in California. But this book has been pretty much, I don't go anywhere without this book. Leslie was one of the first herbalists and teachers to take Western herbs and start to categorize them with energetics. So as I was saying, in China and India, the traditions of energetic herbalism were never broken. Where here in the West, we've had to do a fair amount of rebuilding throughout the last 10, 15 years. And Kat and Phyllis Light, who wrote this last book, have been, pretty much on the forefront of re-establishing Western energetic herbalism. And this book here on the right that you're seeing is the textbook that I use for my West Virginia University class. And in this, Phyllis has really told the tradition, really brings story and context and history of the energetics of Southern folk medicine from the Appalachian tradition. So really just gets into, goes back to the beginning when North America was first colonized, and how plants have been at the forefront of the colonization and then the establishment of the country. And we still use a lot of the the same plants that are in there today, and engage with them in helping our clients heal their digestive issues. So I'm excited to share some of the materia medica with you. So before we get into the plants, I always like to start with some important herbal safety categories. It's always really important to know or find out which category your herbal remedy belongs in, so that you can make a good match based on your health and any pharmaceutical medicines you might be taking, etc. So the first safety category is called food herbs. And food herbs can be used in moderate to large doses for long periods of time. You can think of them as food-like because they're daily tonics. These are the ones that are most commercially available and the most frequently utilized fall into this category. And I've given you some examples: nettle leaf, plantain, the first picture that we looked at tonight, dandelion, both leaf, root, and flower, and you see dandelion flower here in the background. The whole dandelion plant is an herbal medicine, and it is in this food group. And peppermint, of course, would be another example. So probably about 98% of the plants we'll talk about tonight come in this category. Second category for herbal safety is medicine herbs. Medicine herbs are used for a specific purpose, for a specific time period, and usually at moderate doses, unless you're under the guidance of an experienced professional. Sometimes we'll start at a higher dose and then come back to a more moderate dose. But these are more powerful and specific in their activity. If you misuse them, they do have the ability to disrupt balance in the body. You really want to do your research and pay attention to making a good match between yourself and the herb. You want to check with your healthcare provider. You want to check for any contraindications with any meds that you might be on. And a few examples of herbs in this category would be St. John's wort, black cohosh root, echinacea root, and golden seal root. And then, another place of research that you want to go is to also check on the status of these herbs, because sometimes they're endangered. And when they're endangered or they're on the at-risk list, I usually go to the United Plant Savers website. They have a great list of all these plants that are endangered. And when they're endangered, you don't want to get wild crafted ones or wild harvested ones. You really want to get ones that have been cultivated and are organic and from reputable suppliers. So basically what I'm getting at is, you don't want to go out into the mountains near your house and start digging black cohosh root without having an idea of, first of all, have you ID'd it correctly? Is that a big enough colony to be able to sustain that? Pretty much what you'll want to do is go to a reputable supplier that has, cultivated the root organically. So we really want to make sure that the Appalachian plants in particular that are losing their habitat and are so over harvested that we, protect those for future generations to be able to have as well. And then our third category of safety is called toxic herbs. And even though these are not widely available in herbal commerce, we don't use them a whole lot. They're not suitable for home use unless you're working with someone who's very skilled and has experience. It's still important to know, which herbs are we talking about here, and what are their qualities? How have they been used in the past? So we still want to protect these, this body of knowledge and understand which plants we're talking about here. And one of the most common ones here in Central Virginia that we're seeing a lot at this time of year is poke or phytolacca, and those are pokeberries that you're seeing there in the background. And poke is very helpful for extremely stagnant lymph. But again, I wouldn't be using that if you didn't know what you were doing or didn't have experience. It is a toxic plant. So this is a good time. I'm just going to stop share briefly. This is a really good time for us to stop and pause, Sarah, and just entertain any questions about energetic herbalism or safety categories before we go ahead and get into the plants. And we can take just a few now, and then we can come back after class and answer a few too.
Yes, if anyone wants to put any questions in the chat, we can look over them now.
No questions yet, huh?
Not yet, but we'll give it a few moments.
All
I'm
right.
sure people are probably taking it all in.
Anything stick out to you, Sarah? Any areas that you think I need to talk a little more about, or anything you had questions about, or?
I personally am very interested in Appalachian folk medicine. So I found that part really intriguing. And yeah, I've learned a few things from different herbalists in the past, and putting it all together is great with the hot and the cold and the tension. I think that's a really good way to place it in your mind too, even though it is also accurate. It's a very good way to place it in your mind.
We're going to take those same qualities and talk about them in context with the herbs here in a moment. But yeah, I love Phyllis's book so much. And cats too. I mean, they both have a very good understanding that story is so important, right? Our stories. And, just a generation or two back, this body of knowledge was passed on from generation to generation through stories and experiences that people would have with plants, and how they healed them. So.
I do have one question, which you might be getting to in your next section. So let me know if that's true. Someone said, any particular herbs for nasal polyps?
Yeah, we will talk about, I think we have some plants in the upcoming section that could be applicable for that, but no one plant stands out in my mind as being like law for nasal polyps. Yeah, let me think on that a little bit as we go.
Sounds good. I think.
All right, we'll get into the plants.
Sounds good.
So one of the things that we like to do when we're talking about plants for any part of the body, any organ system, but especially for the digestive system, is we like to categorize them into groups of what they do or what their qualities or actions are. And then within that group, you can make a more specific choice that suits your needs. So with the digestive system, we talked about how spasms and cramps and gas pains and just general spasmodic pain in the digestive system is just such a problem for so many people. Even if you haven't been diagnosed with something like IBD or IBS, those things, the spasms and cramping and pain can be an issue. And you want to look for plants that have that quality to them. So here are three plants that are in that group, and probably one of the most common kitchen garden plants would be catnip, Nepeta cataria. Most people have catnip in their kitchen herb garden, and it's a really wonderful digestive system antispasmodic that's also in the food safety category. So really safe herb, easy to use. You could use it in tea, you could use it in tincture, and we'll talk about preparations here in a couple minutes. But especially if you're the type of person when you are stressed out and then you want to have a meal, then you pay for it with that bloating and cramping, catnip can be really helpful for that. It also has an affinity for the liver and really helps help kind of smooth out those emotional kind of outbursts we can have, kind of like angry, quick temper. I'm kind of thinking about teenagers, hormonal kinds of imbalances where you can have mood fluctuations. The liver usually plays a part in those, and catnip is a wonderful mint family plant that can help that situation a lot. Cramp bark, the one you're seeing in the middle, Viburnum opulus. This is a native Appalachian plant. The bark is what's used, just as the name implies. And cramp bark is wonderful for spasmodic pain anywhere in the lower body, whether it's lower back, menstrual cramps, or any kind of cramping that would go with inflammation of the lower digestive tract. Again, whether you were diagnosed with something like Crohn's or colitis or not. It's a very warming herb where catnip is more cooling. Let's go to our herbal energetics now. So as I was talking in the earlier part of the presentation, we kind of want to get an idea, kind of each of these plants has their own personality and their own qualities and actions. And the temperature is part of that. So where catnip is cooling, cramp bark is warming. Where catnip is more bitter, I would say cramp bark comes much more under spicy. So there's a little bit of an essential oil there with the cramp bark. It sort of disperses that cramping. Wild yam root is specific for hollow organs that get spasms. And so it's not just pigeonholed as, you know, a menstrual cramp or hormonal irregularity kind of herb, but it's also a really fabulous digestive ally. And wild yam root is a great cholagogue, which means it's helpful for the gallbladder. So any kind of gallbladder stagnation, bile stagnation, gallbladder pain, of course, you always want to get that checked out by your healthcare practitioner. But little wild yam tincture can be really helpful in helping that resolve and getting the bile more smooth flowing. And releasing the little bile ducts can get all twisted up too, just like the intestines can. So that pain can really be relieved by something like wild yam root. So again, if you look at this whole category, we're looking at antispasmodics. Our next category are called astringents, and astringents basically tighten and tone, and most of these herbs are high in tannins, and that's pretty much, you know, even the tannin in black tea and green tea, that's the impact it has on the body, the mucous membranes of the body, as it helps tighten them up. So this would actually be one, whoever asked the question about nasal polyps, you know, I don't think astringents would fix the whole situation by any means, but when there are polyps on that mucous membrane, it tells us that the surface of it is not functioning as it should be. And tightening up those mucous membranes and tonifying them will help them function better. And three common ones that we use for the digestive mucous membranes would be meadowsweet, which also happens to be a fabulous analgesic or pain reliever. And also just really great at bringing down inflammation levels. So, you know, pretty much if you have an itis, it ends in itis and has to do with the digestive tract, meadowsweet could be really helpful at reducing that inflammation. The center picture you're looking at is Rubus idaeus, or red raspberry leaf. So a lot of times people think we use the fruit in herbalism. The fruit is a fabulous food, but we use the leaves to make tea mostly in herbalism. I rarely use red raspberry leaf in tincture form. I almost always use it in tea. It makes a delicious tea. And again, when else would you need an astringent for this mucous membrane of the digestive tract if there was diarrhea? So, you know, astringents will help sort of dry up that the liquid over dampness of the diarrhea, and then help tonify the whole digestive tract, so it's just less likely to have diarrhea. And then the herb that you're seeing on the right is called agrimony, Agramonia eupatoria, and it's another tightener. It's in the rose family, just like red raspberry is, and fabulous at bringing down inflammation, tastes pretty good, very helpful at relieving pain as well. So similar to meadowsweet, but not quite the same. Agrimony is one that you'll see out on your hikes here in Central Virginia. It really likes to grow in meadows, and sometimes even see it in the woods on a hike along the trail. And I think most people are familiar with red raspberry and where we see those. Actually, all the rubus species are used as herbal medicine. So, you know, sometimes when you see them, you might not know if you're looking at a red raspberry or a blackberry, depending on, you know, what your botany skills are. You always really want to just carry an ID book when you're hiking if you're looking at medicines, because the one thing you really want to make sure that you're doing is that you've got a proper ID if you're wild harvesting. Our next category of important herbs for the digestive tract are carminatives, and carminative herbs have essential oils in them. And anybody who's ever opened the lid of an essential oil and smelled it and let that smell go into their sinuses and their nose knows that basically essential oils disperse energy, and does the same thing in the digestive tract. Essential oils will disperse energy, relieve gas, help the food move through, right? We've all had that experience of having that delicious dinner and then feeling like the food is sitting in our stomach like a brick and it doesn't want to move. And we just kind of get more bloated and more bloated as the food is kind of sitting. And carminatives really relieve that. If you've ever been to an Indian restaurant, what do they have sitting by the door, right? Fennel seeds in a bowl. So traditional cultures really had a good understanding of this food grade herb, right? This is in the food safety category, very safe. The energy here is warming and oily. And we could talk about this herb for respiratory health as well. It's also wonderful. I put some in some wild cherry cough syrup I was making here today at the store, but it's going to open the lungs just like it opens the digestive tract and helps that gas move through. And we've got 3 pictures here. We've got it, the bulb is edible as a food. So we've got the plant here in the center. And then we've got the flower here on the right, but Feniculum vulgare. And there's a bronze fennel as well that can be used for medicine. It's not the exact same that you see pictured here, but it will work. So, most everybody has some fennel seed in their kitchen spice cabinet. And even if it's been in that little McCormick tin for 10 or 15 years, you can go in and you can get a tablespoon of fennel seed and put it in a cup of water and get yourself a really effective digestive medicine just by going into your kitchen and making some tea. Some other important carminatives in the food safety category are other spices that you may also have in your kitchen, like caraway or carum carvi. The top right picture is caraway in the plant stage, the flowering stage, and then the seed is there on the left. Most of you are familiar with caraway in rye bread or caraway in sauerkraut, very spicy and aromatic and opening. So also going back to our person that asked the question about the nasal polyps. So nasal polyps can also kind of obstruct that breathing space in the nasal cavity. And any of these carminatives that are also, high in essential oils could also open that space. So whether it's stuffy sinuses or nasal polyps, blocking the way, the essential, it's just a different way to get the essential oil from the plant onto the tissue, right? By making it into a cup of tea and then breathing it in, you're getting that essential oil on those membranes and then drinking it as well. You're getting it internally. So Zingiber officinale is ginger root and another common kitchen medicine. Down on the bottom right, available at just about any grocery store. And then of course, dill seed. Dill seed is a pretty famous one for infants along with fennel seed. If you have an infant at your house that is actively involved in having colic pains, just 5 or 6 drops of dill or fennel seed tea can really help relieve that. A lot of times they'll pull their little legs up and you'll be burping them on your shoulder and they just can't get that little burp out. Again, 5 or 6 drops of tea can really solve that problem. And those are food grade herbs. Very safe. Talking about herbs here that are safe for the youngest and the oldest, and everyone in between. Another important category of herbs for the digestive system would be demulcence, and that's just kind of a fancy word that means slimy or soothing. So mucosal membranes can also be dry. So we talked a little bit about damp mucosal membranes, but when they're dry, to counterbalance the dryness, right? Energetic herbalism is all about balance, creating balance in the body to create health. And when you have an imbalance, you want to counterbalance with something that has the opposite property. So if the mucosal membrane is dry, and you can have an idea of what your digestive system is doing by what your sinuses are doing, by what you've been diagnosed with. You know, if you have a lot of ulcerative kinds of things going on, then, you know, you've got some wounds that are on that surface of the mucosal membrane and the digestive tract that need to be soothed. And marshmallow root is one of my favorite slimy herbs to help do that. A lot of times these herbs are used in a gruel. Like you can either put them in a small amount of organic oatmeal and eat it that way, or you can even just put water in the powder and make the herb into a gruel all by itself, and take spoonfuls of it. So here on the left, we're looking at Althea officinalis, or marshmallow root. This is in the hollyhock family, and you can probably tell by looking at it if you're a gardener, but very easy to grow. This is one of the first herbs I ever grew in my garden, and it really spread a lot. And there's actually properties, demulcent properties in the leaf and the flower as well, and they are edible. It's just that the root kind of has the most sliminess in it. And marshmallow is actually one of the few herbal medicines that you can make a cold infusion out of, so you don't have to use hot boiling water to get those sugary, slimy polysaccharides out of this plant. And then on the right is slippery elm bark, and I have the leaf on the top and the bark on the bottom. And this is a good example of an endangered herb. So we rarely use slippery elm bark with people anymore. We really try to save it for the people who need it the most. So, you know, if a client's really having issues with ulcers and ulcer pain, then we may bring that in. But, you know, kind of for your average case of heartburn, we're not going to be using slippery elm because of its status out there in the wild. And then, of course, I don't have it pictured here, but the very first plant that we looked at tonight, Plantago major, or plantain, common yard weed, that is a demulcent that almost everybody has growing. Even if you live in the city in an apartment complex, I bet you have plantain somewhere on the property. Now, you do want to be a little careful of where you harvest. We haven't talked about that, but you don't want to be harvesting under power lines or right next to the road, or where animals frequently visit it, or there's, you know, people spraying, that kind of thing. But the weed medicines are prevalent for sure. So let's see, if we go back through, we have talked about antispasmodics. We've talked about astringents. We've talked about carnatives, and now we've talked about demulcents. So we had 4 categories so far of herbs that we can look at for the digestive tract. And now we'll talk about hepatics, which is a whole nother category. We know how important the liver is to digestion, right? The liver does over 500 things for us, but it is important, particularly for fat digestion. The liver and the gallbladder both. The liver makes the bile, the gallbladder stores the bile. And all bitter herbs are hepatic and cholagogue to some degree. But there are some that are more than others. And here are 2 of my favorites that are in the food grade category of safety. Artichoke leaf. So this is the same plant. If you like to eat artichokes from the grocery store and dip the little bracts in butter, this is the same plant, except in herbal medicine we use the leaf. And We'll put that in tinctures, we'll put it in bitter preparations, we'll put it in tea. And milk thistle seed is actually a liver trophorestorative, which is just a word to mean regenerator. Milk thistle seed actually helps liver tissue regenerate itself and reproduce itself. If you get Amanita mushroom poisoning and end up at the hospital, they're even going to give you some silymarin or some milk thistle seed extract to help your liver. So besides hepatics and gallbladder or cholagogue herbs, we also can talk about laxatives. And laxatives are something that we actually rarely use in herbalism when it comes to strong laxatives. Generally, we encourage people to get hydrated. You'd be surprised how many people just are not drinking enough fluids. Or how many people are not getting enough good fats in their diets, and then we'll support their body's digestion of those fats with bitters. We'll talk more about those in a moment. But we really try to make strong laxatives last resort. And we never use them by themselves when we do use them because as my friend would say, they will rip you a new one. You don't ever take these laxative herbs by themselves. You have to take them with carminatives. So if you go to the health food store, for instance, and you pick up like a large bowel formula or a large intestine detox formula, it's going to have like 10 or 15 different herbs in there. It'll have a bunch of these strong laxative herbs, but it's also going to have carminative herbs that we just talked about. And it's also going to have demulcents, because you don't want to hurt yourself by just using the laxatives all by themselves. So, you know, rather than trying to put together your own herbal formula of laxatives, if you get to that point, I would recommend simply going to your grocery store, going to the tea aisle, getting some Smooth Move, and that's already formulated to have some of the carminatives and demulcents in it, and just simply taking some of that before you go to bed, along with some extra water. Exercise is very important to overcome constipation. Movement is key. So getting that walk in every day. We tend to lead such a sedentary lifestyle that really can be part of the constipation issue. What we do use a lot of in everyday herbalism are called aperients. And these are gentle laxatives that really support just the health of the lower digestive tract. One of the things I love about these plants is that they contain the prebiotic fiber that we know is so important to feed our good bacteria in our guts. Dandelion and yellow dock in particular are very high in inulin, and inulin is one of those prebiotic fibers that can really help feed that good bacteria, those counts in colonies down there in the lower part of the body. And, when they are there at numbers and number of species that they're supposed to be, then constipation is going to be much, much less of a problem. So you're taking a good probiotic, make sure you're also getting some aperients to help feed them. Here's a couple more images of some laxative herbs. Buckthorn, which is a plant that does grow here in Central Virginia, and then also aloe vera leaf, which is a pretty commonly, most of us have an aloe plant at our house, and most health food stores sell preparations of aloe vera leaf. The leaf is the laxative part. The gel is actually a demulcent and a soother of mucous membranes. So you always want to make sure, what's in your preparation. What are you actually getting ready to take if you're going to engage with that herb? I'm going to stop share really quickly here. So, what you would be doing is you would be considering what your digestive issues are, and that will sort of help you think about what category of herbs you need. And then within those categories, you can make more choices about, which one might be a good one for you. I definitely would start with, the more food safety category herbs. We could have put peppermint in the carminative category, and peppermint is one of the few cooling carminatives. Most carminatives are warming. So this is a good time to ask for questions, and then we'll finish up with our herbal medicine making part. Is that okay, Sarah?
Sounds good. Yeah, we have a few questions that came in. Some of them I will save for the end just because they're more general questions, but for right now, someone asked, is cramp bark good for thigh cramps as well?
It could be, yeah, it could be helpful with that. Although, anytime there's any kind of leg cramps, you really want to think about your mineral status and are you getting enough minerals? Yeah.
And then you might be getting to this with your next segment, but are these herbs to be used in powder form or?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay, awesome. So
right.
the question will be answered shortly.
Yes.
Is wild yam root the same yam extract that's used for hormonal and estrogen properties?
Yes, it's the relative of the Mexican wild yam that was used in the original birth control pills. It's not the same plant, but we do also use Dioscorea villosa, the one that I had pictured in my slides. We do also use that to help balance the progesterone side of women's cycles. But menstrual cycles are very related to liver health, and wild yam is very much a liver and gallbladder herb. So, yeah.
That's super interesting. I did not know that. Fennel seeds for lungs, should they be steeped in water or inhaled or chewed?
You could do any of those things, but we're getting to our basic tea recipe and our bitters recipe. And also, we don't have enough time to do a whole basic medicine making class tonight, but I do have a basic medicine making handout that Sarah will be sending out after the class. So, if you wanted to make a fennel tincture instead of the recipe that I'm going to be making tonight, you can just use that handout to help you do that. So I do see someone's asking about a good source for dried herbs. The book titles, I'm not going to go through again because those are going to be on the slide. So that'll be very easy for you to, you'll get a PDF of the slides, and you can look at that. But here in Charlottesville, the Elderberry, where I'm broadcasting from, is a fabulous place to get good organic herbs. The herbs, when they come here, they go through 3 quality control processes. And I'm a little biased, I guess, about how great our dried herbs are. But we have, we're probably almost up to about 2/3 local herbs now. So we have actually a lot of local herb suppliers that we do business with. So a lot of our plants didn't come from far. We do still get a few from Western suppliers.
And then there was a question about the use or different things to consider for post-op gastric bypass patients.
Yeah, that's a much more complicated question. I don't think I would feel comfortable answering that without knowing the case more and the history, and that's also one where you're gonna want to be working closely with your medical professionals too, of what you can tolerate when. But yeah, I've had several clients throughout the years that have had that surgery and have helped them, but that's needs more than a drive-by. Yeah. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. And we'll just talk about some of the digestive preparations for the digestive system. There we go. So our first preparation, we'll talk about our water extractions or herbal tea. And in this picture on the left, you can see my personal favorite method, right? We're talking about low tech, everyone. Really, all you need to make an herbal tea is a saucepan, water, and a plant. And when I make my herbal tea at home, that's what I do is I put the saucepan on, I put the water on. This what you're seeing in this picture is a root. And when you're having root tea, you always want to boil it, not just steep it, because roots, it takes more energy to get the medicine out of roots. And then in the center picture, you can kind of see like all of the nice fancy things that you can get along with the low tech things you can get. So as simple as a canning jar, and then all kinds of tea caddies out there now. We carry several different kinds here at the Elderberry, where you can put your loose tea in the little strainer basket there, and then put that into the water bottle, and then pour the hot water on top. And then, as you go off to work, you've got your 3 or 4 cups of herbal tea steeping in there. And yeah, this picture here on the right, another example of you can steep your tea in a mason jar, and then you can strain it right into whatever jar you want to drink out of. So pretty easy stuff. And I'm going to give you my basic recipe next. So here are the basic tea recipes and ratio. We always want to talk about dried plant versus fresh plant. So a lot of people are going to be, getting plants off their property or out of their kitchen herb garden, or maybe they bought some fresh herbs from their local grocery store. It always takes more plant material if you're using fresh plants. So 3 tablespoons of chopped. And the whole point there, that you have to chop it to break the cell walls so that you can actually get the medicine out of the plant. So you can't just take a handful of parsley. I mean, well, you can throw a handful of parsley into water and get some parsley tea, but you're going to get a much stronger medicinal brew if you chop the plant material up. And dried plant material, on the other hand, takes less, right? When you dry plants, you concentrate the contents, the medicinal constituents in there. So it takes less material. So 1 tablespoon of herbs per cup of water. And what makes the difference between an herbal beverage and an actual medicinal tea is the amount of plant material you're using and how long you steep. So, if you go to the grocery store and you buy herbal tea, it's probably just fine. But if you just let it sit in the water for 5 or 10 minutes, you're not really harnessing all the medicine that's in that tea bag. So if you see at the bottom of this slide, one of my kind of hints or hacks is, if you want to make a beverage tea, let's say you have some throat coat in your tea drawer at home and you have a sore throat and you'd like to use that, just make it with 2 tea bags per cup of water, and make it in a saucepan so that you can let it steep a full hour, and then heat it up again before you drink it. And then you're going to have a really medicinal tea brew, as opposed to just an herbal beverage. So my preference, what I have my clients do and what I do is I make my tea at night before I go to bed. So pretty much all the time I have a daily tea blend that I'm drinking, and then I'll change it if something comes up. If I think I'm getting a cold or something, I'll be drinking something different. But like today I had nettle and sage, and ideally I make that at night before I go to bed. It sits there in the saucepan all night without heat. And then the next morning, I'll just strain it into a mason jar, and off I can go to work with my day's worth of tea. So I find it much easier to make a day's worth of tea instead of just a cup of tea at a time, because the daily average dose of tea for an adult is 3 or 4 cups if it's a leafy tea. Now, roots tend to be a little stronger. So oftentimes if someone's drinking a root-based tea, we'll just do 2 cups of tea for them a day. But generally, if you're doing a tea for nourishment or a tea for your digestive system, if you actually want to accomplish something, you're going to need 3 or 4 cups of tea a day. So make it all at one time, let it steep overnight if possible, but at least an hour. and then consistently have it over 2, 3, 4 weeks to get a good result. Some exceptions to this would be, I already mentioned roots, right? You don't necessarily need to use as much of the roots in there, and you can drink less of that a day. But also really, really strong herbs like lavender bud. If you've ever tried to make lavender bud into tea, you know, if you used a whole tablespoon for a cup of tea, it would be like, whoo, you would really not be able to drink it. So there are some exceptions. So fresh teas tend to have more chlorophyll and enzymes, and dried teas tend to have more tannins. But that being said, the same plant is going to give you the same constituents. So in other words, what I'm getting at is, if I want to have a lemon balm tea for relaxation, and I have fresh lemon balm and I have dried lemon balm, I'm going to get the same relaxing qualities out of either one of those. It's just that the one that, if I make it fresh, it's going to have more chlorophyll in it. If I make it dried, it's going to have more tannins in it. And you've already learned one energetic principle tonight. You learned that astringents tighten and tone. So you know that the dried lemon balm with tannins is going to have more of that astringent quality to it. Ginger is another one that we could talk about before we leave this slide. So dried ginger is actually much more intense and heating than fresh ginger. And so most of the time, if I'm having people drink ginger tea, I like to have them use fresh when possible. It's just a little less heating. So I want to talk a little bit about bitters before we go make some bitters. And bitter both describes a flavor, and it also describes an actual herbal preparation. And it comes out of that European tradition of bitters, although just about every traditional culture around the globe had an understanding that the most bitter medicines were the best and strongest medicines. And particularly in Europe, they would drink their bitters right at the bitter hour. It's that pre-dinner. So when you needed to stimulate your appetite, relax, feel less stress before you eat, you would have a bitter cordial or an aperitif. And a lot of the European countries have their own kind of bitter preparation. You've got Campari from Italy and Swedish bitters from the Norwegian countries up north, namely Sweden. But sometimes even villages will have their own little cordial that they offer. And the bitter flavor has some other therapeutic qualities to it. So again, we're coming back to energetic herbalism here. And what does the flavor of bitter physiologically do in the digestive system and for the body? They stimulate the appetite and they help get your saliva going. They help that amylase be released and help get you ready to digest. It lets your body know that food is coming. They are slightly antimicrobial, so they're really nice to travel with, right? You never know, you're in a different microbiome situation, somebody else's house, a different country, something like that. Having these bitter digestive preparations with you can really help you lower the chance of digestive disturbances. Again, they are relaxing. We're all trying not to eat when we're stressed, right? When we are stressed and we are in fight or flight, our digestive system turns itself down. It doesn't turn itself off, but it's definitely not working at full tilt. And so by having these bitter cordials or bitter tinctures with our meals, we're helping our digestive system function more optimally. We have bitter receptors on our tongue, that send messages to our liver and gallbladder that say, fat is coming, make the bile, release the bile. And so bitters can really help support fat digestion. And many of us have a hard time digesting fats. I mean, part of that is because we're eating, inflammatory seed oils and hydrogenated oils and that kind of thing. But even good fats, we can have a hard time digesting, and these preparations will support that. They stimulate peristalsis, so they help keep you regular. Another good reason that I don't travel anywhere without my bitters, right? When we leave the house and we're staying overnight somewhere else, and we know we're going to be doing our daily business somewhere else and other bathrooms and so on, it can kind of get in the way of our regularity. And bitters can help keep us regular that way because they stimulate peristalsis. And when the intestine begins that nice movement of peristalsis, then you can have a good, healthy bowel movement. And then we also have a concept that's very important in herbalism that we call digestive fire. And it's that fire in our belly that gives us the energy to get up and do our life, the energy to move forward, the energy to get things done, the energy to not be as depressed. And in our culture, we tend to eat a lot of really ice cold foods and beverages and iced tea and, iced sodas and cantaloupes and iceberg lettuce all winter when they're not in season. And that adds a lot of dampness to our gut and to our stomach and our digestive system. And physiologically, if you're looking at this, from an anatomy and physiology perspective, what we're talking about when I say digestive fire is we're talking about hydrochloric acid in the stomach. We're talking about the digestive secretions that have, the pepsin and all those enzymes and the bile and all of the fluids in our digestive tract are meant to work at body temperature, and they're meant to, not get frozen out by eating 3 cups of ice cream a day and those kinds of habits that we all tend to fall into in our culture. And so, when we put out our digestive fire, we feel it. We feel depressed. We stop digesting. We stop really being able to get a clean burn of our food, right? Our metabolic system becomes sluggish. And when our metabolic system becomes sluggish, we can gain weight and just not feel our best. And so these bitters, they're cooling and a little bit draining of that dampness that we were talking about when we were going through the energetics. So they will relight that digestive fire over time. And we're talking about very simple herbs here. Herbs like burdock or Arctium lapa, very common weed, and dandelion root. We talked a little bit about dandelion earlier, but we spend a lot of time and money on chemicals to get dandelions out of our yard, and it's one of the best bitter medicines out there for our liver and for our bile. Gentian root is a wonderful bitter as well. That really is probably of all the pictures on this page, the most bitter of all of them would be the gentian root. And here's the recipe that we're making tonight. And also Sarah has a recipe she'll send out after class that has some different kinds of recipes on it as well. But this is kind of like a basic bitters recipe. Probably people already have orange peel and fennel seed at their house. Take some dandelion as well, but we're just using flavored vodka. You could use whatever vodka you have on hand. You could also use brandy. Basically, what we're making here is an herbal tincture, and tinctures are alcohol extractions. There isn't any alcohol that's 100% alcohol. There's always some water with it. And so most of the vodka in your liquor cabinet at home is going to be 80 proof or 40% alcohol. And you do have to be a little bit careful when you're using brandy, because a lot of the brandies are flavored and they're kind of like only 30% alcohol. You really want about 40% alcohol to make a tincture. It might sound highly technical and intimidating, but don't be intimidated. You have a basic recipe that's going to be coming in the handout. And really all you have to do is put herbs in a jar and then cover them all with alcohol. They sit for about 6 weeks. Now, if you're like me and you're not very patient and you kind of get in a hurry, if you have a really good blender, you can put the herbs in there and powder them. And if you're working with powdered herbs, you could get your bitters to be ready in about 2 weeks instead of 6 weeks. Just makes straining a little harder. Then you have to use some muslin cloth when you're straining. But I'm going to demonstrate these bitters in just a moment. But we're going to go through the rest. Wanted to include a couple pictures here of the tincturing process. This is what the jars look like when they're sitting on the shelves. This is the maceration process, right? The herbs have to soak in the alcohol for a while. Now, if you can't tolerate alcohol, or you're in recovery, or doesn't agree with you, you can make these in vinegar. Raw apple cider vinegar works best. You're not going to get as many constituents out with the vinegar, but you're still going to have a very good digestive product. So I don't want to, try it both ways. See what you like. See if you like the vinegar better, or if you like the alcohol preparation better. It would take about 50 doses of these alcohol tinctures, these herbal tinctures, to equal up to 1 alcoholic beverage. So, these are still in the American Pharmacopoeia. They're medicines. They're not alcoholic beverages. So you're really, when you take your bitters at mealtime, you're really only going to be taking a 1/4 to a teaspoon with each meal. So it's not that much alcohol. And the bonus with the alcohol is that it does deliver the herbal medicine right to the liver, right? Where tea is going to have more of an affinity with the kidneys. Tinctures that are alcohol based, and even vinegars, are going to have more of an affinity with the liver. And here, what you see in these other pictures are some of our processes. If you have a strainer and a Pyrex measuring cup at home, you have a very good situation for straining your bitters. And then you can see here in the third picture where I've taken my cheesecloth and now I'm separating the herbs from the actual tincture. And then you would just store them in a glass bottle. They don't have to be refrigerated. The alcohol will preserve them. And then on the right, you can just see we have a fancy herb press here that we will sometimes use to separate small amounts of tincture if we make a small, like, quart size. So I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to venture out in the kitchen, and we're going to put together our bitters, and then we'll have a short question and answer session. Does that sound okay, Sarah? Okay. I'm going to mute. I don't exactly know what's going on out here. We are closed now, so we shouldn't be running into customers.
Oh, you're still on mute, Heather.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to show you a couple jars of bitters that we have macerating right now.
These are our pear bitters, and you can see we actually have some fresh pear pieces in here. This is one of our more popular bitters preparations here at the Elderberry. We sell little bottles of pear spice bitters, and these have pears and gentian root, which was one of the plants that we just talked about, is in here. And this one has orange peel and ginger and some other things in it. But this is an example of the little dropper bottle of bitters that you would carry around with you. And then just, you know, before your meal, and if you forget, you can do it during or after. You just take the dropper and you squirt it right in. And you go, you have to make the noise with it. So, you know, we eat so much sweet in our country that when we really start having bitter things, it can be a little off-putting at first, but we really need the bitter flavor for balance and bringing balance to the digestive system in particular. Here's another jar that we have macerating. This is a brand new product that we haven't debuted yet. We're calling it Barberry Cranberry Bitters. And barberry, like golden seal, has berberine in it, and barberry is very helpful at getting, you know, once bad bacteria has kind of taken over a little too much real estate in our guts, we need to have some of these more heat clearing berberine herbs like barberry to help bring back balance. So we've mixed this with some cranberry flavored vodka and some other kinds of flavorful herbs to come up with a bitters that will help. Here's an example of some raw vinegar that you can pick up, you know, at Costco, Trader Joe's, pretty much any grocery store is going to have some raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar. If you want to make digestive preparations that are not alcohol based, you could start by using this. Today, what we're going to be using for our menstruum or for our extraction is, this is organic cane spirits, and they're orange flavored. So this is what we're using today. And the herbs that we're using today are dandelion root, fennel seed, and where did my orange peel go? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm not seeing my orange peel. But we're gonna put orange peel in, and what I do is I buy organic oranges all winter, and whenever we eat them, I just save the peel, and they dry very easily in my kitchen. And then I save them for when I'm making these bitters. And these bitters, by the way, make lovely holiday gifts. So if you're wanting to make something homemade for your family for Christmas to give away to all your relatives, consider making a couple batches of these and then bottling it in the little dropper bottles and sending them out. All right, so I'm going to show you how easy this is. You really don't even need to measure. I gave measurements just so you would have a guideline, but it's really not necessary. So folk herbalism tells us that if we fill this jar about halfway with dried herbs, we're going to have a nice, strong preparation. I know that there are some of you out there that will want to measure those. So again, if you go to the recipe, it's going to tell you how many ounces. Might hear that beeping. That's our Instapot. We're making some herbal oils, and so that's telling us it's done. So we want to end up with about 2 ounces of herbs in our pint jar. Got our dandelion root in there. I'm putting in the fennel. Fennel really lends some nice flavor and carminative qualities. I'm going to grab the orange peel and I'll be right back with you, Sarah. We're just going to use, this is orange peel, like from the spice cabinet, like culinary orange peel. So orange peel is really helpful at moving digestive energy through the digestive tract. So when you're getting bloating and that stuck feeling after you eat, really, really helpful. Lots of bitter properties to it. So it's adding to the bitter flavor as well. So you can see we're about halfway with herbs. And now literally all we're gonna do is pour the alcohol on top. A little bit better view. Bring that up to the top. We're gonna cap it. We're gonna make sure that we label it. And you always think you're gonna remember exactly what's in there, but you won't. So you always want to label your herbal medicines. And then this is gonna macerate. Now it's really important to shake this. I was mentioning that dandelion root has a lot of inulin in it, a lot of starch. If I just let this sit, basically the starch is going to fill in and come out and fill in, and then it's going to be stuck in the jar. And then the alcohol is not going to get all over the roots, and it's just going to get stuck, won't be as potent. You can see already the alcohol starting to pull out the herbs. You can see it's changing color kind of even as we're looking at it. But it's not rocket science. It's very easy, very satisfying. In 6 short weeks, we'll have some nice bitters here. What you want to do is you want to tend it every couple days. You want to turn it upside down, shake it, and then strain it with a method that I showed you in the previous slide. I can also give you a little view of my tea from today. So let's see. You can see my little strainer, right? That I like to use for my jar. So it's like literally this is what I was drinking out of all day. And I just strain my nettle and sage tea right into the quart jar. And you know, another reason why I like using these jars is it really helps me keep track of how much I'm actually drinking, right? I really don't want to have, it's not going to hurt me if I have 5 or 6 cups, but there's no need to have 5 or 6 cups. And, you know, you can go overboard on things. So, yeah, this gets me to about my 4-cup mark. And these are nice to travel with as well. And they do have kind of the newer plastic lids that don't leak, right? So the old white ball jar lids really would let the herbal preparations leak out. These new gray ones that Ball makes are really great. And of course, the traditional metal ones with the rings are just fine as well. They're a little hard to come by these days, but hopefully you have some old ones around the house. So happy to answer questions if people have questions. And I hope that the visuals allowed you to see a little bit of what I was doing.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. I'm sure that was helpful for me, so I'm sure it's helpful for everyone else. Let's see, going back to a few questions. Do you steep dried herbs in cold water? I know you're mentioning it was overnight, so it wasn't overheat.
Yeah, I bring them to a boil and then let them sit. Yeah, it's really just, there's very few herbs that you can do with a cold infusion. And marshmallow was one of the ones I mentioned that we covered today. But yeah, I actually like to give my teas a short boil, just a minute or two before I turn it off, just to really get the medicine out of there. I don't like to waste. So, and Phyllis actually, we talked about her book, Southern Folk Medicine. Her method is to really use more water, less herb, and then she boils for a long time. So in a sense, it's almost like a traditional Chinese decoction method that she likes to use with her teas. So there are many ways. That's one of the things about herbalism is you can go to different books, different online sources, and everybody's going to tell you something different. And they're not wrong. Herbalism is an art and science of tradition. We learn from our teachers, passed on to apprentices and students. And so this tea recipe that I'm giving you of a tablespoon of dried per cup of water, or 3 tablespoons chopped fresh per cup of water, there's probably over 100 years of experience behind that recipe. And it's not the only good recipe out there. But because that was given to me by Kat, and it was given to her by her teachers and so on, it's been used a lot. So
I love that tradition. That's great. Also very approachable that way. There's no just one right way. Someone has a question about, do you need a special kind of pot or pan? Like, does it have to be stainless steel, or is there any like metals you shouldn't use or anything like that?
I definitely wouldn't use aluminum. We're all trying to reduce our exposure to aluminum. It's a neurotoxin. But if you have a good stainless steel or porcelain is good, even some of the old glass pots, any of those can work just fine. Yeah. We don't have to be super picky about that. I saw someone also asked about yeast infections, and I don't want to say specific for your yeast infection, but I will say a couple general things about yeast infections. Yeast can only grow where there's dampness. So I find that most people that get yeast infections have too much dampness in their metabolic system or their digestive system. So some of the herbs that we're talking about to help address dampness, like the bitters, would be really helpful for those with yeast infections. Of course, being mindful about your carbohydrate and your sugar consumption is going to really help that situation. And then if I could say one herb that could potentially help with yeast, that's a food. I'm only giving this advice because it's in the food grade safety, because I don't really know what's going on with you, would be calendula tea, calendula flower. So calendula flower tea is a great all-around liver normalizer and antifungal, without being like a strong herb that would be contraindicated with a lot of different things. So
thank you.
Potent yet safe.
Someone was asking about any herbs or plants to recommend for sundowning or agitation in the elderly at night to help them calm down before sleeping.
Yeah, chamomile. Really like good old chamomile tea bags. You can get it at any grocery store, and you would be surprised how effective chamomile can be at calming anybody down, anybody that's agitated at any age, young or old. Yeah.
And there's just a few more. We're getting close to past 6:30. Would barberry cran assist with balancing pH levels?
There's not that kind of cranberry in there. It's more of a flavor. So I think I know what you're getting at with the acidity of the cranberry. So I'm going to say no. But I guess also you could say anytime you're helping your digestive system be more healthy, you're going to potentially be balancing pH in the body. So maybe, but I don't think I'd feel comfortable making that claim about it. So.
And thank you everyone who's been saying thanks for the presentation, that you guys have enjoyed it. We're so glad to have all of you here.
Well, I included my contact information. I think Sarah is going to be posting this on their YouTube channel. So if you have, if there's anything I can help you with or any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to try to do that. And for that matter, if you call the Elderberry anytime we're open. All of us that work here are clinical herbalists. We have to be real careful about what we can do over the phone. You know, we can't take a case over the phone and then try to help you. But if it's something general, then we could do that. And I'm also, you know, as we're finishing up, I'm realizing a whole thing that I missed that I should have said toward the beginning when we were going into safety categories was, in general, 2 categories of medicines that you want to not mix with herbs would be blood thinners, right? Old school blood thinners like warfarin and that kind of thing. And then heavy duty psych drugs like benzodiazepines and that kind of thing. So you always, if you're on any kind of pharmaceutical medications, you really want to make sure that the herbal path you're getting ready to get on is not contraindicated, and work with your physician around that closely as well too, if you're polypharmacy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for being here and sharing all of your
welcome. It's my pleasure.
I love hearing about all this stuff. I've taken an interest in herbalism too, so it's been really great for me to hear all these things. And I'm so glad to everyone who joined us and stuck around for all the questions and asked questions.
Much. Well, and reach out and let me know how you enjoyed your bitters. So I always like to perfect my recipes. So, yeah.
Yes, and to everyone, I'll be sending out a follow-up email like we've been mentioning with a link to the YouTube channel so you can see that, and some handouts from Heather, including some of the recipes. And please feel free to check our website, Allegheny Mountain Institute, and we'll have, we post other workshops and events, and donations are also very appreciated. It's how we make these workshops free and open to the public. So yeah, feel free to check us out and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Take care, Sarah. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.